Thank you. Thank you, Alan. So good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Nairobi. My name is Wambui Chege, and I am the independent chair for Making Finance Work for Africa. It's wonderful to see so many of you here, and I can see some familiar faces. We have lined up for you a very, very interesting session and a very interesting panel. This is the last session for this year's annual general meetings, and I think that it will also be the most interesting. So thank you, and a very big warm welcome from us here at Making Finance Work for Africa. I'm going to start this session with a personal story. So sometime this year, towards the middle of 2020, when we were right at the height of lockdown in Kenya, my nieces got COVID, and they are my sister's children, and I live right next to her. They are teenagers, so they can take care of themselves, but they actually got symptomatic. My sister is a single mother, and she's also a working professional. And I provided support to her during that period, but it also struck me just how affected and how special the situation is, and this pandemic is affecting working women and women in general. And this was because during the time of the sickness, when the children were sick, you could not visit, so you could not really offer support that you needed other than a lot of emotional support, which means that she had to do all the cooking, she had to do all the home-based care, she had to do the house cleaning as well, and she still had to deliver for her work, for her clients professionally, because she is self-employed. So it was really, really tough, and it was 1.5 months of this. 3 COVID tests later, the children were cleared and everyone was clear. But what my sister went through as a professional African working woman just highlights the plight of many women on the continent and across the world, and what they have experienced during this COVID period. I myself was also affected because I was staying with my mother and I had to take care of her, and we were right at the height of delivering some really, really, really serious work. Now, women are caregivers. They bear the brunt of domestic workload, and during lockdown, and if you get sick, there is no help. You have to figure out this for yourself. They are also many times the breadwinners. And so it's really tough. And across the world, the observation has been that this pandemic has not only hit vulnerable people, so the poor, but it has also hit women in a very special and very hard way. Already, it was hard enough because the gender gap as far as financing is concerned stands at about 9% on the continent. And I believe that this has become even worse with COVID. So with me here, I've got different panelists, all very interesting, from the private sector, from the banking industry, and from the international development world, discuss how we can ensure that post-COVID, and even now as we're dealing with the pandemic, how do we ensure that women are given the support that they need from an economic perspective, from an all-around perspective, and to ensure that even as the economies and as policymakers are drawing up the economic recovery programs, that they ensure that they are inclusive and they support women and that they are gender sensitive. So our panelists today include Abimbola Agbejule, who is the head Corporate Sustainability and Responsibility, Wema Bank in Nigeria. We've also got Moa Westman, who is a gender specialist at the European Investment Bank, which is also a member of, a governing member of Making Finance Work for Africa. We've got Nuru Mugambi, who is the Public Affairs Director, Kenya Bankers Association, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Finally, and last but not least, we've got Mohamed Khalif, who is the head of financial inclusion and intermediation at the African Development Bank. I'm going to dive right into questions, and we're going to have questions and a discussion for about the next 20 to 30 minutes with the panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. In the meantime, please feel free to put in your questions on chat, and we will answer them once we open it up to question and answers. So I'll start with you, Abimbola. If you could please introduce yourself, your institution, and what you are doing in regards to economic empowerment of women in general.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here. And I'm glad that we're talking about this at this time. This is really apt. Women, I can say verbally that women are actually the most impacted with the issue of COVID, especially in Africa at this time. My name is Abimbola Bejule. I work with Wema Bank. I currently head the sustainability desk for Wema Bank, and we're passionate about women. We're passionate about their growth. We're passionate about empowering women, because when you empower a woman, you empower a nation, and a lot of things happen. Like the story you just told, a lot is happening in the African sense. And even if you're not a single mother, a lot is actually vested onto you to ensure that the family keeps going and it thrives so strongly. For us at Wema Bank, we're doing all that we can to ensure that everybody, regardless of your level, your profession, even the most vulnerable people in the segment of the market, we ensure that we actually capture them and they are getting the best from our bank in terms of support to grow economically, socially, and also health-wise. Health is actually very key, because a healthy mind is a wealthy mind. So that thing is actually very, very, very important to us. I'll be sharing more with us as we go along the program, and you hear more about what we're currently doing at Wema. Thank you.
Thank you, Abimbola. So Moa, I would like to invite you next to tell us about what you're doing with regards to economic empowerment of women.
Yeah, hi Wambui, hi everyone. So pleased to be here. Like you mentioned, my name is Moa Westman. I'm a gender specialist at the European Investment Bank Group. And very much like you pointed out, Wambui, in the beginning, we have all been touched by this pandemic, and also here in Europe, as earlier in the spring, kindergartens were closing down. Me and my husband really had to struggle to find a balance between keeping up with our demanding jobs as well as having kids at home and taking care of everything in the house. So in different ways, I think it's it's touching all of us across the world in different manners. So EIB, where I work, is the largest multilateral lender and borrower in the world. In 2019, we provided financing of more than 70 billion to projects across the globe. We invest in both the public and the private sector. We have a particular focus on climate action, innovation, infrastructure, and of course, SME lending. And within all of this, we are fully committed to contribute to advancing gender equality and women's economic empowerment through the investments that we do across different sectors and geographies. And for this, we have a very robust gender strategy and action plan in place. It focuses on 3 core pillars. It's protect, impact, and invest. Protect means that through the application of our environmental and social standards, we make sure that all our investments uphold the rights of women and girls, and that we do not inadvertently reinforce gender inequalities through the operations that we finance. This is particularly important when we finance large-scale infrastructure projects, for example. The second pillar is impact, and this focuses on how can we enhance our positive impact on gender equality by targeting projects that can help to address a known gender gap within a given context. These, of course, vary from region to region and across different sectors. But we also look at how do we make sure that women and girls equally benefit from the services, products, but also employment opportunities that are generated by our investments. And then thirdly, invest, where we really look at investing directly in women's economic empowerment and women entrepreneurs. We do this through our financial intermediaries, and with that we can support both women micro-entrepreneurs, women farmers, and also women-owned and led SMEs. Last year, we actually launched a special initiative for Africa called She Invest, whereby we aim to mobilize €1 billion of investments to provide women across the continents with better access to finance, but also access to different type of infrastructure services and products. Lastly, just want to mention that we're also part of the 2X Challenge together with another 15 development finance institutions to increase investments contributing to women's economic empowerment in developing markets worldwide, and through which we also have a clear set of criteria as what we mean by financing for women and women's economic empowerment. With that, I'll stop and looking forward to engage in the discussion.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that outline. I'm now going to invite Nuru, who has done some really good work with the Banking Association on gender, just to tell us how they, as an industry, and how she's driving access to gender, access to women, access to finance for women.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's really good to just engage with the community. So as you rightly say, I work at the Kenya Bankers Association. I'm one of the directors at KBA, and KBA is an industry body. We look at policy work, we look at standards, we also facilitate engagement towards really developing the financial sector. Within the space of gender, it falls under our Sustainable Finance Initiative that we launched several years ago. Gender falls within our principle around promoting sustainability within the market through inclusion and innovation. So gender is anchored under that principle that we have. I would probably point to, and I know I'll talk about it a bit later, I'll point to the Inuka Enterprise Program. This is a program that I helped develop to really provide a free resource for entrepreneurs to support them from basically a technical assistance perspective. So capacity building, helping them understand those key areas that they might not necessarily be strong in. So I think we all know that a lot of entrepreneurs don't go into business because they're passionate about balance sheets, right? They're passionate about baking, or they're passionate about making things with their hands. They're passionate about service, hospitality. So that's why they go into business. That's why they start their businesses, not necessarily some of those technical aspects in operating and running a business. So it's very important that we align resources to really support the technical aspect of helping entrepreneurs navigate. And that's the service that we're trying to do through the Inuka Enterprise Program, which has been really good. I also sit on the steering committee that supported the national government in developing the credit guarantee scheme, and Zomo talked about it in the earlier session. And it was a long process of really just trying to understand what type of intervention that can the government come in with to really catalyze and stimulate and accelerate access to finance for SMEs, including women. And then maybe I'll possibly add, just as a final note, I helped contribute, and many of us within the financial sector contributed to the National COVID Recovery Strategy, which was launched by the government. And within that was the key aspect of gender disaggregated data. And this is the first time that we are hearing the government really talk about gender disaggregated data at the policy level pertaining to access to economic stimulus program. So we're very happy to see these measures coming through. I was actually just talking to Dr. Mary Okello. Dr. Mary Okello was the first Black woman to be promoted to a manager of a Barclays bank in Africa. And that was in the 1970s. And I was talking to Dr. Okello on Monday, and she was just like, Nuru, what are you doing for women? And I was just trying to run her down everything that we're trying to do. And I touched on gender disaggregated data. And Dr. Okello said, Nuru, you don't understand. We have been talking about gender disaggregated data since the 70s. Let that sink in. 4 decades. We've been talking about, from a policy perspective, the need for us to start tracking gender disaggregated data. And it's only now that we're starting to look at it. So I think it's something that maybe through the Making Finance Work for Africa network, we really need to latch on and make sure that it just gets embedded and implemented in terms of really tracking the gender aspect in all financial policy aspects. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, thank you. That's really interesting to hear. And it's a great point you've made, because part of the reason we are having this session as Making Finance Work for Africa is because we are exploring, and we are right in the middle of doing our strategy sessions, and gender is a topic and an area that we are really, really exploring and thinking about working on moving forward from here. So, I mean, it's just mind-blowing that women have been here since the beginning, but only now. So, Mohammed, I'm going to invite you to tell us about what you're doing as far as supporting women's economic empowerment at the AFDB.
Good morning from where I am, and hopefully good afternoon wherever you are. I happen to be in North America at the moment, so it's almost about 8 o'clock, 8:20, so it's good morning here. My name is Mohammed Khalif. I'm head of financial intermediation and financial inclusion. And what does that mean? I basically handle the banking sector for the bank. All 5 commercial banking banks in Africa, development financial institutions, mostly regional development financial institutions, private equity funds, also insurance come under the intermediation. Now, on the financial inclusion is payment systems, digital payment systems, where we work with central banks in order to improve the digital payment system and government revenue collection digitally, all those kind of things. We work ministries of finance, we work with tax authorities, African tax authorities, and we work with central banks. So that's exactly what we do. One is the financial inclusion part of it, which focuses on the digital financial inclusion, and that includes also women and commercial banks, but also on the other side, commercial banks. So that's basically what I do. I have a portfolio of about, I think, $5.9 billion outstanding. And I happen to see one of my clients, Wima Bank, here, and glad to see that Bimbola is here also. So that's what we do in general. Now let me come to what we do for the African gender issue. We have a program called Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa. It has got pillars. The upstream pillar is the creating enabling environment. This is where we have discussions with governments and regulators to improve the regulatory framework, the policies, and that's on the upstream. We also have got also access to finance, which we channel through banks. And I will elaborate later on exactly some of the big initiatives that we're doing, and then also capacity building. And what we do in the capacity building, we do it at the upstream governments in order to draft policies and influence policies and regulations. And also we do at the financial institutions, but we go well below the financial institutions, and we go to the clients of financial institutions and provide technical assistance in women empowered, not women owned only, women empowered businesses. Women empowered businesses is different from women owned. Women empowered can be industries that produce exclusively women products. It's not owned by women, but they only produce women products. So it's women empowered business, for example, just an example. So that is in general what we do, and it's a big program, and I will provide details as we go along. I think it's I think, what do I think about gender? I happen to come from Somalia. 30-something years, Somalia without a central government. A country of about 13 million people is saved by women. Literally saved by women. I'm Somali and I know that. Without Somali women, Somalia would have gone down the drain. While men were killing each other, fighting and robbing and raping, women were taking care of the kids, putting food on the table. And mind you, Somalia gets about 3.5 billion transfer from the diaspora. 90% of those come from women, not from men. Men are busy with buying weapons to fight each other. So, and I happen to be the father of 2 daughters. So women, I mean, basically, I breathe and live gender equality at any time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. What a wonderful business case you've made for supporting women, women holding up Somalia, and for the work you're doing at AFDB. So one of the things that we had yesterday during some of the other sessions of the AGA is that people have been comparing this COVID crisis to the global financial crisis that happened. But the big differentiators, as many of the panelists indicated, was that at that time, the crisis started with financial institutions, with the financial sector. And over the last few years, a lot has been done to strengthen financial institutions. And so financial institutions at this point during the pandemic have been found in a stronger place and in a position to support economic recovery and to support survival through the pandemic. So what I would like us to move into now is to just have a discussion around what are some of the trends that we are seeing? How have some of your clients been affected by COVID, and what specifically your institutions are doing to support women during this time and to ensure that we have a post-economic agenda-sensitive economic recovery. So I'll start with Abimbola.
Thank you again, Mambi. So I can, like they've all mentioned at the earlier onset, saying that what COVID has done to all of us, especially this part of the world, women are like the most impacted. The trend started with women not being able to go to do their normal businesses. So a lot of women run small businesses, so they can't open up their stores. The supply chain was impacted. Everybody was locked in. We couldn't even get enough food to eat as well, because you need to transfer food. The way Nigeria is, you transfer food from the north down to the south, and from the part of the south to down to the cosmopolitan areas like Lagos. So all of these things impacted everyone. The kids were at home. Most offices were locked. And so that was what we noticed as well. So everything nosedived. And for us at Wema Bank, we ensure that we actually took care of everyone, not just women at this time, by saying, okay, we know that you cannot afford to do some repayments, start looking at maybe moratorium for you. How can we support you in terms of capacity building? We had a number of those sessions under our flagship premium proposition called Sarah by Wema, ensuring that the women are trained. Sometimes it's not just about funding alone. You also need to re-strategize. Okay, before now you go to the shop to open up. How about selling online? People still need to eat. People still look at delivery logistics. We looked at packaging as well. How do I preserve the things that I sell and to be able to reach the last mile? We looked at people into telecommunications for professionals. Before now, we all come to work. Now, if you have to work from home, then you need to have the right tools, i.e. you need to have connection to the internet is a reliable one at that. You need to have other work tools like a reliable laptop. You need a phone, you need a desk, you need so many other things that could keep you going. So there was financing available for that, for those sort of things as well. More importantly, we looked at mental health. A lot of people have just been locked in. We've never experienced this before. And so we had different sessions around mental health. We had newsletters that we sent out to our clients saying this is how you need to do it, you need to breathe, safety precautions, preventive health care, how you can walk around basic things that you need to do just to keep yourself going. We did all of that as well outside of financing. We also ensure that we speak to some of our partners that are available, that what can you do to support our customers? In what line can you come in to help us? So some of them offer to do some capacity building in terms of restructuring your books. So some businesses like those in the hotel businesses and hospitality generally, they couldn't do much. They couldn't open up the restaurant. So what can we do at this time? How do we diversify? What do we need to look at? And so they brought people together. So there's an association in Nigeria called APOEM, Association of Professional Events Planners and Managers. You know, Nigeria is big on parties. And so we had to do that as well. Post-COVID, we had another situation in Nigeria, which was the Nsars Movement. And that was like another violent episode for us in this part of the world. So a lot happened. Besides the loss that we've already recognized during the COVID period, a lot of shops were looted. A lot of female-owned businesses were vandalized. Their shops were vandalized, their equipment were vandalized, and that will cost much more money. So it goes beyond the financing that you do. So you now need to look at all the capital. So because bringing in some of this are capital intensive, so how do we help? How do we support? We look out to partners, we looked out to date. There's so many things that had to be done at that point in time. So now we've learned our lessons, we learned different things. So we all must re-strategize to be able to cope in the near future. So things have changed, businesses have changed, and we intend to continue to support our customers in this line. We intend to get more partners because it's only collaboration that can make us to come out tops. So we can't do it alone as an institution. So we need more partners to come in and let's jointly do this together to help women. We also noticed post-COVID that a lot of women could not send their children back to school. So we worked with the Lagos state government in Nigeria to actually bring back some kids to school. So some of the children that were dropped off, we supported them in terms of bringing them back out, bringing them back to school, because we realized that if we don't take these kids out now, in the next few years, they become what we don't intend for them as. And besides, education is a right for every child. And so we intend to, we supported them and we got more partners to go along with. And as we speak, we have about 2,000 kids that have been brought back to school. We'll still be doing more, but those are the basic things that we've done. And those are because of the trend that we're seeing, a lot more is still going to happen. And we need to start planning towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for outlining the ways in which you are providing support for a gender-sensitive economic recovery. Now, Moa, I would like to invite you to tell us what you are doing and what are some of the trends that you've seen, not just in Africa, but also across your portfolio.
Yeah, thanks, Bambui. And I think like all of us on this panel, what we are really seeing and echoing the points of the previous speaker is that generally, I mean, the SME and micro entrepreneurs are really struggling in the context of COVID-19 across various sectors. For us, it really affects our SME and microfinance portfolio in particular. And we know that, you know, while women-owned enterprises across the world represent almost a third of businesses, 68% of them have unmet credit needs, amounting to a $1.7 trillion credit gap across the globe, which is just huge. And there is really no need for this credit gap to exist. There is plenty of data and research out there, you know, showing how women-led or owned businesses really perform as well or even better than those run by men. But what we are also seeing is that these gaps and inequalities are being exaggerated in the context of the pandemic. For example, women entrepreneurs are often not reached by COVID-19 response packages that tend to focus on larger businesses with many employees. So what we are trying to do in response to the crisis is to just scale up our general support to SMEs to help companies affected by COVID-19 uncertainties. And as an example, as part of this response package, we have just finalized a 30 million euro loan to DFCU Bank in Uganda. And out of that loan, a minimum of 30% will be dedicated to either female entrepreneurs or women-led businesses, or very importantly, like Mohammed pointed out, also to businesses that through their services or products help to close a gender gap, or particularly is targeting you know, the women's market. So through this loan, we'll scale up also support, to farmers, entrepreneurs, trade and manufacturing companies, and really looking at wherever possible, targeting those that either are owned, led, or employ a lot of women, or through their products and products or services are targeting them. And we're looking at providing more flexible financing to reflect the COVID-19 challenges that these businesses are facing. Because really, if we are to, to build back better and not leave women behind out of the recovery responses, we need to do more to intentionally channel finance to women empowered businesses, while of course making sure that these type of support and finances get out in the market as quickly as possible. And then also connecting with some of the things that Abimbola were speaking about, the broader trends, and also what we touched upon in the beginning of the session is of course related to gender occupational segregation, the caring and domestic responsibilities. It's really affecting the respective capacities of women and men, and regardless of gender, whoever is the primary caretaker in a household, to maintain jobs, livelihoods, but also it's generating different level of exposures to the health risk of COVID-19. We see many women at the front lines of the healthcare workforce, for example. And there are statistics showing that in some countries in the health sector, double the amount of women are attracting the virus as compared to men in that particular sector. Of course, there are also, worrying reports worldwide showing a rise in domestic violence in the wake of the pandemic, especially as countries were closing down and people had to stay back home. And we know from past disease outbreaks and similar events that access to, for example, prenatal and maternal care services, frontline response to gender-based violence really suffer in these type of situations because the resources are just diverted elsewhere. So in response to also these broader trends, we have this year really ramped up our investments in the healthcare sector. We have backed the BioNTech One, which is one of the COVID-19 vaccine developers, and will be supporting an international COVAX initiative, which aims to ensure fair and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, particularly in Africa, and looking to target the most vulnerable and ensuring that women and girls are, equally reached as a part of those efforts. So really applying a gender lens also to health sector investments, not only in the financial sector, are crucial to make sure if we want to reach female patients, but also as many women are indeed in the front line of the workforce in these sectors. In Europe, we are also targeting investments in the care economy, recognizing how unpaid care work is one of the key drivers of gender inequalities here inside the EU, and how it really has just increased massively during the pandemic for many of the reasons we have already touched upon. So all of this just really underlines the need to apply, a gender lens to all type of COVID responses and rescue packages, whether it's, within health, or like Ambibola was saying, looking at how is it affecting education and the girls' access to school, or just families' abilities to put kids in school, or whether it's in the financial sector and reaching women-owned and led businesses. So it's really about looking at a more holistic approach if we are to build back better and not leave anyone behind, and in particularly not women.
That's really true. Thank you, Moa, and very, very well said. We must make sure that we do not leave anyone behind. I like what you've said, especially about making sure that we apply a gender lens perspective to every single strategy and every single plan that our policymakers and institutions and lenders in the financial sector design to ensure that no woman is left behind. I'm going to invite Nuru to please tell us what we have seen in Kenya, and also what the Bankers Association and what the financial sector in Kenya is doing to support women.
Okay, thank you so much, Wambui. So I think what we are seeing in Kenya, and it ripples right across the continent, is that for the first time, and actually right across the globe, I would say, for the first time, we're seeing how quickly a social issue can cascade and have a material impact on the economy. And this is, I think, the first time we're seeing this type of trend in our lifetime. Typically, when we talk about sustainability and sustainable finance, we really usually focus on the economic or the environmental dimension of sustainability. We usually don't really focus on the social aspect of sustainable finance. And usually when we do talk about sustainable finance from a social perspective, we talk about cultural heritage. So this is the first time we're actually experiencing how interconnected the environmental, economic, and social aspect of sustainability of our economies are, how strong those bonds are. And I think we are now also realizing the risk we face because of our market structures that are so broadly informal in nature. So I think policymakers and the market as well, of course, through the Bankers Association, the banking industry, and all other financial sector actors are really now looking at this aspect of informality. Not only how the traders trade and how our clients and entrepreneurs in the informal sector operate and trade, but also from a policy perspective. And what we're finding within government and also through the economic recovery strategy process, the government is now looking at really promoting digitization of government services, interconnectivity of government offices, both at the national and county level, because we realize that we need to leverage on ICT and technology to really understand our economy in real time, really just try to get that high frequency data to help inform the policy making process, but also really just to ensure that we understand our markets better. So therefore we can manage better and respond better. So that is some of the aspects that we're finding, and also what the government supported by the financial sector is looking at, really promoting the use of technology to really operate and understand our market structure. I think really looking at, from a KBA perspective, supporting the banking industry and supporting banks to better work with their clients, again, to address this issue of informality. And it's not only the informal sector that is informal in how they operate. We found that even professional organizations, even including the architects, might not have formal structures, business continuity plans, might not really use a data-based approach to managing their businesses. So I talked about the Inuka program earlier, and through the Inuka program, we're really uncovering the fact that a lot of businesses, even though they might even be tax compliant, the way they operate is informal. So we really need to address this issue of informality bias within our markets. Bringing it to the gender aspect, some time ago, KBA did a research to really understand why do people borrow and how do people interact with the banking industry. And what we found was that women borrow for just a few reasons. One, they borrow because they want to start or run a business. That's the number one reason why women borrow. The second reason we found was women borrow because they want to educate themselves and they want to educate their families. The third reason why they want to borrow is because they want a home. They want that security. And finally, because of health. So when you think about the COVID experience and everything that we're hearing today in this conversation around how COVID is impacting on trade, how COVID is impacting on the education sector, how COVID is impacting on the health sector, therefore you can see the correlation on how it's affecting women, because these are the priorities that women have: business ownership, their families, education, health, and home ownership. So these are aspects that we really need to look at, and we're trying to help our members pay attention to, particularly when it comes to the COVID response program that the industry, together with the central bank, has been advancing. The Central Bank of Kenya, I think, has just really been commendable, and so has National Treasury, in terms of being very quick to consult with the banking industry to really understand the interventions that need to be brought through. Banks have repriced more than 1 trillion shillings worth of household loans and business loans. And a lot of these loans fall within these sectors that we're talking about: manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, trade, of course. being these key areas. And it is my hope that through the policy process that we, and also because of the aspect of disaggregated data within our economic strategy, economic stimulus strategy, that we start tracking the impact of some of these loans that are being restructured. The credit guarantee scheme that was launched just this week in Kenya, just tracking the utilization of that. Just so we can move away from these anecdotal comments to really data-based comments. The other aspect that we're seeing, and my colleagues have touched on this, is really just the health and wellness of society, and really addressing this issue of gender-based violence, which has become the next global pandemic that we're facing. So within the Kenya Economic Recovery Plan, there is a section that addresses this issue of revisiting our gender plans that were last revised in 2014. So revisiting these plans based on the COVID experience, because again, we're all learning through this process. And I think it's just one of these remarkable times in history that we get to experience such a crisis real time and really make sure that we set in place policies that can help enhance resilience for the next generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuru. In fact, one of the things that I'm really gleaning from these conversations is the fact that we have to take a more holistic view of our society and economic growth and development as a whole. There is absolutely no way we cannot take care of the social aspects of economic growth. Now, Nuru, I know that you're going to leave soon. There is a question, I'm just going to break away from the structure that I think you need to answer, that has been asked by someone from the audience. They have asked, I will want to know more about your work on gender disaggregated data. What is it all about and how does it impact the financial policy of the government of Kenya? So just really before you do this.
Sure, so, okay, so when you look at how financial institutions, their systems, so when you look at, from a banking perspective, their corporational systems, when you look at insurance, when you look at pension sector, a lot of our systems are structured in a way to pull information, management information. And as I mentioned, since Dr. Okello's times, the 1970s, financial institutions have not been tracking the gender aspect of their management information data. So, hi. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I thought someone was trying to raise a question.
Yeah, don't know.
Okay, yeah, so our systems really have not been mining that information, and we have not been really from a decision-making process perspective, been factoring in the gender aspect. We've been talking about it, and what I said is more anecdotally. We know that generally women are better borrowers because they tend to repay their loans. They tend to direct the capital to what they intended it for. So when they borrow through a business line or business loan, typically that money will go to the business. It's not going to be redirected. So we know anecdotally this information, but we've not been tracking it from a system perspective. So that's why I was saying that it's quite key that the current COVID stimulus plan that has been released by the government last month brings in this aspect of ensuring that all COVID interventions include a gendered aspect to it. So that means that whenever the government says we're launching a 3 billion shilling fund to support SMEs, then there will be a COVID requirement that we're tracking how women are benefiting from that capital that banks are going to be extending. And these are important policy signals, I think, that will finally be able to help us realize these objectives that we've been trying to push through for quite a while in terms of us gender advocates within the financial sector. So really, it's been a long time coming, but I think the right signals are in place. And I talk a lot, and I've been talking a lot this year about this issue called the COVID Kairos. And Kairos is a window of opportunity. And I think we have a window of opportunity to really advance and push through a lot of the gender policy changes that we have been wanting, and the likes of Dr. Okello have been praying for decades, because everybody is listening and willing to collaborate. And I really do also want to commend the international development community, because we're beginning to see more collaboration. Before, there was a lot of competition between the DFIs and the sovereigns, but at least now we're beginning to see more alignment and cohesion. And I think that's when we're going to get more impact. I think when we're pulling apart the pie, the impact, I think, is very shallow. But if we're able to align, like, for example, this Kenya Credit Guarantee Scheme with support from USAID, African Development Bank, World Bank, FSD, AGF. So partners are now beginning to see the need to actually not compete, but to collaborate to ensure that there's greater impact.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really liking one of the themes that's coming through from this entire discussion, which is that we really have to put women at the center of any plan, any policy. And as you said, the Kairos, which is, we have an opportunity now to make sure that we take care of the gender perspective moving forward from here. We must just never have a situation like we had before, where we do not take care of women's interest. So Mohammed, I'm going to invite you to tell us what the AFDB has seen across its Africa-wide portfolio, and also what you're doing to support women during this COVID period, and to ensure that we have an economic recovery that supports women post-COVID.
Thank you very much. We all know that the COVID has affected most of the businesses, but more particularly the bottom of the pyramids. And those bottom of the pyramids happen to be small and micro businesses, mostly owned by women. So therefore, the COVID has affected more small and micro businesses owned by and or operated by women. So that is the case. But the bank, I think we were way ahead of the COVID itself. I think about a year and a half ago, the African Development Bank came up with what we call the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa. And I think it has got different pillars. And given that we are a wholesale bank, we don't normally go to small businesses. We go through financial institutions, and we also go through big mega projects. So we are wholesale. So, we don't deal directly with SMEs and or microfinance business. So the bank took a strategy and said, how can we deal and or help and support women empowered or women-owned enterprises, and came up with the Affirmative Action Finance, which has got different milestones. On the top of it, I think it's advocacy. And this is the advocacy involves raising awareness. One, the bank has created a special website where women-owned enterprises can come for technical advice and advisory services. So that is the advocacy part of it. The second part of it actually came through access to finance. And the bank took a view that if we are going to support a financial institution and or finance a big mega project, we have to allocate part of that funding for women-owned enterprises. So anytime, for example, we give a line of credit, it's a senior debt to a bank, and we try to allocate at least 30 to 40% of that line of credit to the bank, to women-empowered businesses. And it always comes with a technical assistance as well to build the capacity of the women business-owned enterprises. So it also goes the same for big projects. I mean, if we're doing, let's say, a big hydro dam, we will say, okay, the subcontractors, we want a disaggregation of the subcontractors, and we want to see women-owned, for example, providing maybe the transport or maybe the other services that that big project might require. So that's also part of the funding of the bank. In addition to that, we came up with the enabling environment. Before you do all these things, I think you have to create a conducive environment in which governments and parastatals and other ecosystem players recognize that there is, in fact, a gender imbalance in our financing, whether it's from the government, from financial institutions, from development financial institutions, and that awareness you have to create by influencing the environment, the policies and the procedures and the procedures. I think with respect to what we have seen that in terms of the impact of the COVID, what we have seen is that financial institutions have tightened up their lending programs. They have actually tightened. And that simply comes from, one, they have seen the non-performing loans or loans that they have given to companies have actually, have not surfaced regularly. So there was a default. So their non-performing loans went up. And that's the corrective action they took was to tighten the lending. They tightened the lending also because of liquidity problems. They couldn't borrow themselves from the market because everybody have, most of international banks which provide short-term loans to commercial banks actually have, also reduced the amount that they will lend to banks in emerging markets, and particularly Africa, which is always the first victim. So that has further impacted the bottom of the pyramids, the women-owned enterprises. And I think the more authoritarian person who can talk about that is Abibola, because she's my client. I deal with banks, and now she was telling us exactly how that has impacted. But when the COVID case, sometime March, April, May, we received almost about 120 applications for about $6 billion of liquidity. And also we also lent to governments. The governments requested almost about 20 billion, and we only have a limited resources, and therefore you have to allocate and balance, and we couldn't do what all those financial institutions wanted us to do, provide liquidity, because they see us as a lender of last resort, and we couldn't do that. So the impact is in fact there, because the demand for financial resources was huge, both from the governments and from financial institutions, but I think there were only limited resources. We are not as big as the EIB, which we work with. We have limited resources. The EIB has got the EU resources, but we have the African resources. So unfortunately, we could not do. But I think overall, the strategy that the bank have taken, which is a holistic view. Let's address what are the challenges in terms of policy, in terms of access to finance, in terms of advocacy. I think we're doing a good job. And in fact, we are processing, as we speak, a 250 million risk-sharing facilities with different banks dedicated only for women. And those will target a lot of African banks through through a specified intermediates. And we hope to sign that hopefully before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've had a really, really interesting discussion, very rich contributions from our panelists. I would like to open it up for questions, and probably we'll take about 3 questions if there are any before we close the session. So I see some of the questions that had been asked have actually been answered. Let's see, there's one that has come in. Okay. All right, so I believe all the questions that had been asked have been answered. I'll ask one last round of questions to the panelists, which is, you're all talking a lot about the services and the support that you're offering. How is it that if I'm a woman out there, how do I access the services? How do I access this wonderful support that you're offering? So I'll start with you, Mohammed.
Well, thank you very much. As I said from the outset, I think we are a wholesale bank. We're not a commercial. I think you have, excuse me, you have commercial banks in each African countries. They have got their areas and their nose very close to the market. They know the market dynamics much better than us. And that's why we said we will be a wholesale bank. So I would suggest that, one, if you have cooperatives, women cooperatives, I suggest that you pool your effort together and go to a specific bank and say, we want to borrow as cooperatives. 1. 2, you can approach the African Development Bank country office in your in the country in which you live and ask which banks does the African Development Bank provide loans to support women. And we can give the names of those banks, and you can actually go and say, I would like to be part of those risk-sharing facility in which the African Development Bank has put with you. But mind you, that these banks have got their own risk management framework, their policies. We do not impose them on who they should lend to. So they are independent. It's a corporate governance, and we do not want to be the boys who promote bad corporate governance and interfere the risk management framework of those institutions. But you can go to the country office and ask the banks that we support and ask them to provide funding for your businesses. But before you do that, you have to do, as a woman, you have to do your homework. You have to have very good bookkeeping record so that they will ask for a data. Do you have, let's say, financial statements? Are you established? Are you registered? These are the questions that you really need to compile before you go to the local bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. So if I get it correctly, you did say that you could provide a list. Is it provided on your website, or where exactly is it provided?
No, it's not provided on our website, but you can, the country office, you can just, the country offices, you can write to them and ask them exactly which banks do they, the African Development Bank deals with, and they will give you the names.
Okay, great. So how about you, Moa?
Yeah, thanks, Vambui, and really my response will be very similar to that of Mohammed. Our business models are, essentially alike. We do lend to microfinance, local banks, and private equity players across Africa, and with them we then have agreements that they should target, a certain percentage of those loans or credit lines that we are providing towards women entrepreneurs, women-led businesses, or these type of companies that through their products and services address a known gender gap. In the same way as Mohammed, we then do not, influence who gets these loans, but to really, approach those banks that we have, and that we have these type of targets with is indeed one of the avenues to go about it. Mostly, our information about which institutions we finance are on our website as well, and can be found there. We have a special page on EIB's work on gender, and many of these institutions are featured by name there. So that's one source to go to. Increasingly, we are also rolling out, as Afdb is doing, technical assistance support on the ground directly to women-owned and women-led businesses. We have a program called the Africa Women Rising Initiative that will be operating as of next year in 4 countries in Africa. So you can keep an eye open for that, and for news about which countries we will be rolling that out in. And again, what we are also seeing when we are in negotiations with our clients to target women more is that they sometimes say, but there is no pipeline. We don't know where to find these businesses. So having this kind of, interactions, and also showing that, no, there are a lot of businesses out there, and partnering up with other institutions on the ground that have those contacts and that work directly with women associations, women's cooperatives. It's very important as we move forward. As I think it was Nuro that talked a lot about it, right? We should stop operating, in silos and see each other as competitors, but really to link up and see, where we have complementary expertise and skills, and, while we provide the financing, who is, supplying the businesses and supporting women-led firms to access these loans. We need to build those partnerships stronger. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. So Abimbola, you're going to tell us how people can reach you at Wema Bank.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wambi. And I like the conversations coming in from Moa and from Mohammed. I like the fact that they are both going to be collaborating, and they don't even do that lend directly to customers, so they have to go through commercial banks. And so I like the fact that they all have these initiatives, the African Rights Initiative. I'll be coming to Moa to ask more questions about that, because I have loads of female customers that want to take advantage of this. I have a lot of female entrepreneurs that are into agri in the northern part of Nigeria, especially, that needs this funding to be able to come out of COVID, at least to also help in terms of improving the yields and also the harvest that is coming out. So I'll be coming to you on that. I also like the fact that there's something called affirmative finance for women coming from Mohammed. And so Mohammed, we need this in this part of the world as well. Nigeria needs it. Wema Bank needs this funding from you. I'm sure you know. So for us at Wema, I like the fact that Mohammed also mentioned that for women, it's important for you to have your bookkeeping intact. That's one thing we preach to women. So separate your personal finance from your business finance. So have like a book that you can actually, when you need funding, you can actually bring this out and everybody will be able to look at it, and there's a clear roadmap to that. We also like the fact that you need to register your business. Government is giving opportunities for people to register their business at zero cost at the moment, especially SMEs and entrepreneurs. It's also for you to also keep proper records outside of bookkeeping. So check your stock, check your what do you need, what plans do you have for your business, what vision do you have for your business, and what kind of support will you be requiring beyond finance, and so that banks can actually come to your aid. Remember, I've mentioned the fact that we have a proposition called Sarah by Wema, and you can follow us online. Check any of our platforms. You see Sarah by Wema there. You can log into www.wema bank. You see all our offerings on that platform as well. And we're open to all women, regardless of class, regardless of demographic, regardless of your location, north, east, west, and south. We also have an online banking account. So if you're not in Nigeria, you can actually log into our alert platform. So you can find alerts under our website as well, or you can go to www.alert.com, alert.ng.com. You find it there, and you can open an account easily and start enjoying different benefits. I encourage everyone to actually reach out to the commercial banks. This is the best time to do that. Nuru has spoken about disaggregated data, which is actually very important. It's something that the Central Bank of Nigeria is also working with EFINA. EFINA is enhancing financial inclusion and access. There's a lot of work being done in that, and you see more happening next year because we really want to focus on women, and the social impacts of COVID will start feeling the real impact from next year when business starts to drop and kids start to drop out of school, and then we need to be able to respond to it quickly and better than what we had in 2020. So I encourage everyone, can go to www.wemabank.com. You find more information. We have partners that are willing to help, from what you've heard from EIB and AFDB, as well as other collaborators that are out there. We'll be reaching out to them personally so that we can get great information and initiative from all of them. Thank you so much, Wambi. I don't know if the other question, I think somebody said Nigerian women need loan as well. Well, we will get, we're open. Please send us an email. Go to wemabank.com. You can be able to you send us an email, or I don't want you to go into any bank branch now. I don't want to expose anyone. Let's reach out to us via social media platform. It's just a click away. You can also start your process by opening an alert account under alert.ng.com. Alert.ng. So once you have that, then Sarah is open. We have loads and array of programs that will actually help you to build capacity. We'll also help you in terms of funding. We'll help you with your bookkeeping as well, which Mohammed has said that is key for you to access a loan with any commercial bank at this time. We look forward to working with everyone, and we look for more collaborative partnerships in the near future. Thank you so much, Wambe, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abimbola. And with those remarks from Abimbola and the panelists, I'm going to bring this session to a close. But first, I just want to summarize and provide you with the highlights of what I've had today as key points to keep in consideration when we're thinking about agenda-sensitive economic recovery post-COVID. So the biggest and one of the big takeaways is that we must apply agenda lens across any strategy, any plan that we are coming up with. And COVID has provided us with a wonderful opportunity. Yes, women have been impacted more than most, but it also means there's an opportunity to address this issue, and we have the window. It is now, so we must seize the moment. The other very important thing to take into consideration is that it's not just an access to finance issue. It's not just credit. This pandemic has impacted women in very, very many ways. And I would say everyone in general. So we have credit issues. We have mental health that is also an issue. And we have the issue of domestic violence. So any recovery post-COVID must take all those measures into consideration because we are a whole society and we don't exist outside of each other. Then the other point, which was made very clear and articulated very well by Mohammed, is that any plan must also stand on 3 legs, as I like to say, like a good 3-legged African stool. So you must take care of policy as far as it affects women empowerment. You also must do your best to take care of credit. And I actually would add financial inclusion, because it's not just a gender gap that's a problem here. It's also integrating women into the formal financial sector. And then, of course, building the capacity of women, particularly women entrepreneurs, so that they can access the credit that is available for them. And then finally, and Nuru pointed this out to me as she was leaving, and it has also been pointed out by the speakers, is the issue of collaboration. So we hope that what's going to come out of this is that there will be a lot more collaboration between, for example, the DFIs and the commercial banks and all those institutions which are working to address gender and gender issues in our society and women's economic empowerment. So it's now about almost 5:15, and this is the last session of the Annual General Assembly for Making Finance Work for Africa Partnership. It was my pleasure to open it at the beginning, and it's now again my pleasure to close it. And I just want to thank our participants who stayed on with us, who have been very active in listening as well as participating and asking questions. I also want to say a very, very, very big thank you to all our panelists who spoke throughout. I cannot recall another situation where we had such rich discussions on the financial sector in Africa, and really this has been a wonderful 2 days. And finally, I want to say thank you to the Secretariat of Making Finance Work for Africa, who have done a spectacular job of putting together these sessions, making sure that we have a very, very successful virtual annual general meeting, because we've been able to bring very serious and high level members of our society and business community and the financial sector to the world and to the audience through a virtual platform. So thank you as well to the Secretariat. And with that, I declare the Annual General Assembly closed. Bye-bye, everyone.